All right, welcome everybody. I'm glad to see everybody here. My name is Tom Campbell, and I'm the program manager for the Traumatic Brain Injury State Partnership Program in the Administration for Community Living in the United States Department of Health and Human Services. I am a middle-aged white man with very short, light brown, salt and pepper hair and a closely cropped beard. I'm wearing a checkered shirt and a blue blazer, and behind me is an orange wall with a watercolor picture, and to my left is a wooden bookcase. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for the final TBI Tuesday, the final of 5. We've had a great month. Today's session is titled Maximizing the Effectiveness of Advisory Boards Through Full Participation. We are going to be talking about the full participation of people with TBI in the programs that support them. We have held 5 TBI Tuesday sessions in the past 5 weeks. The sessions were in observance of Brain Injury Awareness Month, and I recognize that we are in April, but it's spiritually still March for TBI Brain Injury Awareness Month, and these sessions have been in lieu of ACL's normally annual in-person Stakeholder Day, TBI Stakeholder Day. We weren't able to have that this year. Instead, we had the 5 TBI Tuesdays. And what that enabled us to do was a couple of really amazing things. We were excited because it enabled us to hold virtual sessions, which allow more TBI stakeholders to attend. Today, we have almost 300 people registered. And this is the number of people that have gotten to participate in TBI Tuesdays, the number of speakers we've had, is far more than we could have had in an in-person stakeholder day as in past years. So it's very exciting, very positive thing that has come out of this. The webinar is hosted by our TBI Technical Assistance and Resource Center, the TARC, T-A-R-C. The TBI TARC is funded, of course, by the Administration for Community Living, but they are our support today. You'll see especially Connor and Terry and several other folks running around behind the scenes. All of our webinars have been free and they're open to the public. And so we want to make sure that, they get maximum exposure. One of the things we've been trying to do through all the webinars is to highlight the work of our TBI State Partnership Program grants. The work they do in their states to build up the services and supports for individuals with TBI throughout their lifetime. There are currently 27 of these grantees, 27 states are represented. They also work together in interstate working groups. And these work groups are behind the content that you've seen in the last 5 weeks. Today, we're going to hear content that was put together by the Advisory Boards and Survivor Engagement Work Group. We've heard, the first week, we heard from the underserved populations, and then Sustainable Partnerships Work Group, and then the Return to Learn, Return to Play Work Group. And then last week, we heard from the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Work Group. All of these sessions and all of these work groups are doing really, really great work. They're producing really rich, powerful stuff. And we're very grateful for their support on this. Today's session is going to be like the others in that we want to highlight the work of the work groups. We want to highlight some federal partners. We're going to hear from Sean Barrett, who is the team lead for the Office of Independent Living Programs in the Administration for Community Living. We'll also hear from Teresa Moore, who's she's a self-advocacy leader from Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, SABE. And she also is the lead on the Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center, SARTAC, which is funded by ACL. And you'll hear more from both of them later on. We'll also hear from individuals with brain injury and their families today about their experiences on the advisory boards and the state advisory councils and other places. A couple of logistics today. So we've got, before we get into the meat of today's sessions, I want to explain a couple of the logistics. So participants are in listen-only mode during the webinar. You're not going to be able to talk to us, but if you need to get us or if you have a question, please use the chat feature in Zoom. If you need to communicate with us in any way. We will have question and answer sessions parts of the presentation today as we can. So whenever you have a question, go ahead and put it in chat, and we will address them as we can during the time that's allowed, that's allotted for that. We are live captioning the webinar. You'll see our ASL interpreters, and we're live captioning in English. So if you don't see the captioning, if you move your cursor, there's a little button. I believe it's on the right side at the bottom. If you click that, you'll see captioning on your screen. And you'll see the ASL interpreters, and we thank them very much for joining us today. Thank you. This live webinar is interactive. You will have an opportunity to respond to polls, one poll in just a few minutes, but there will be polls throughout today, so stay awake and answer the polls. After the webinar, next slide, Connor, after the webinar, you'll see you can send us follow-up questions and feedback. We'd love to have your feedback to this website, this email here, tbitarc@hsri.org. Please note, we're not going to be monitoring this email during the webinar. So if you have a question or you need assistance in some way, please use the chat feature. A recording of this webinar and a recording of all the webinars, along with the PDF version of the slides, will be available on the ACL website. Eventually, they're not there yet, but everyone who registered will get an email telling them when it's up and a link to there. So now that brings us to our first polling question, which Connor's going to put up on the screen. We want to know who is here today. We want to know what roles you self-identify, and please select all of these that apply. Person with a brain injury or other disability. Are you a family member, a friend of a person with a TBI or another disability? Are you a self-advocate? Are you a peer mentor, a peer specialist, a social worker, counselor, care manager? Are you a researcher or analyst? Are you a service provider, organization employee? Are you a government employee at the federal, state, or tribal level, or city level, county? Give you a few minutes to answer those questions, and then Connor will post the results. All right. So it looks like government employee wins that one. 49% of you are government employees, which is not surprising. Since our program is a government grant to state government, so that makes a lot of sense. Service provider or organization employees, family members are around 30%. Self-advocates, 18%. Person with a traumatic brain injury is around 10%. 20% of your social workers, 17% are researchers, and 4% are peer specialists or peer mentors. That's tremendous. Thank you so much for letting us know who's here. And now I would like to welcome Ashley Bridgman. Ashley is the program director of the Tennessee Department of Health, one of our fabulous TBI State Partnership Program grantees. Ashley will introduce herself and get us started with today's program. Take it away, Ashley.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Tom. We just want to say thank you so much for joining in on today's TBI Tuesday webinar session. We are very excited to let everybody know all the work that the advisory board work group through ACL has, all the great things that we have been working on. And I just want to do a quick overview of what we will be discussing today, so you kind of have a better idea of what the webinar will look like. So within our first part, we're going to have a wonderful presentation from the Center for Independent Living from Ashawn Barrett. We're then going to have a presentation on our actual advisory board work group activities and products. We'll have a facilitated discussion on the advisory board toolkit, and we would love to hear everyone's feedback on the toolkit. Next slide, please. We will then take a break, and that break will probably happen around I want to say around 2:30 to 2:45. It'll just depend on how quickly we are getting through each topic or how a little bit far behind we are. Part two, we're going to have a discussion on the importance of having consumer-guided counsel practices and how to become ready to serve on a board. And then we are going to do a quick wrap-up. And next slide, please. And so I'm quickly going to introduce all the wonderful speakers that we are going to have today. Our first speaker will be Ashawn Barrett, and he is the team lead within the Office of Independent Living Programs for the Administration for Community Living. Next slide, please. Then we're going to hear from our ACL state speakers, which one is me, Ashley Bridgman, and I am a young adult white woman with medium length brown hair and 2 blonde streaks next to my ears with black frame glasses. I'm wearing a bright red blouse and I have a gray background today. We'll also hear from Paula Dinslow, who is the BrainLinks Program Director at the Tennessee Disability Coalition. We'll hear from Amanda Cordmire, who is a principal investigator with the West Virginia University Centers for Excellence in Disabilities, TBI service program. Next slide, please. We will also hear from Lucy Cordell, who is a research professional with the University of Alaska Anchorage with the Center for Human Development. And then we're going to hear from Pam Bryan, who is a council member on the Tennessee Traumatic Brain Injury Advisory Council, and she is a family member and caregiver. Rodney Smith, who is a board member of the West Virginia Traumatic Brain Injury Advisory Board. Next slide, please. Kelly Lang, who is a brain injury survivor, caregiver, and former board member. And she will be speaking with the TBI Advisory Board and Leadership Group, better known as the TAL Group. Carol Starr, who is a TBI survivor, speaker, author, and advocate, who is also with the TBI Advisory Board and Leadership Group, TAL Group. Next slide, please. And then finally, we'll hear from Teresa Moore, who is a self-advocacy leader with the Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, better known as SAVE, and the Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center, better known as SARTEC. And of course, Martin Kerrigan, who is a brain injury survivor, teacher, board member, and is also part of the TAL group. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to introduce Sean Barrett, who is our next speaker. And Sean, take it away. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. As was mentioned, I am the team lead for the Office of Independent Living Programs. I was asked to speak today, I believe, in part because the independent living programs, and I'm going to talk predominantly about CILS, Centers for Independent Living, although, as I will note, those are far and away not the entire field, because consumer involvement is very much a part of what they do. Very, very much a part. So there you go. Next slide, please. Thank you. One of the things about that I want to kind of be clear up front is that there is the Independent Living Federal Program that I am a team lead for, and then there's the concept, and you can't necessarily pull one away from the other. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the philosophy of independent living that if you were to read the regs and the law and look at different programs, you should hopefully see absolutely in full force. Next slide, please. So, yes. So what is independent living? In part, it's a culture. It's which means a shared identity shaped by a common history of oppression, the lived commitment to advancing the human and civil rights of people with significant disabilities, the art, music, literature, and other expressions that individuals with significant disabilities create based on their lives and culture, and the pride, definitely the pride, identity, and purpose claimed by people with disabilities. Just in case you thought we all wrote that down, nope, we appropriately cited it because absolutely, this is adapted from Steve Brown, PhD, What is Disability Culture? There's a link at the bottom of this slide for you to, if you want to read more. Although my guess is most of you live this. Next slide, please. There are a few programs, and I want to be clear that these are programs under ACL that we call the actual independent living programs. There are a lot of programs across the country that work to help people gain their independence. We're not trying to comment or provide information on those. This is just the ones that the Office of Independent Living Program at ACL is responsible for. Independent living services, this it is statewide efforts of funding that typically goes through an entity called the designated state entity, which is almost always the VR program. These are some funds that can go for a variety of all IL type things, but are based on the particular state plan for independent living. This also includes statewide independent living councils are part of that funding source. Those are networks or groups of people to advise the independent living planning and services in the state. Centers for Independent Living, we will go into this in depth a little later on. Funding to community-based organizations for the purpose of providing independent living services to individuals with significant disabilities. There are currently 352 functioning of these that spread across the country. And one of the things that I have said a million times is they all look a little different. They all have the same law and regulation to be called Part C Center for Independent Living as funded by ACL, but they all look a little different, and you'll see why in a second. Training and Technical Assistance Centers, we have two of these, one for the SILs and one for the SILCs. ILRU, Independent Living Research Utilization.org. That's ILRU.org is their website. Section 21, these are a couple of awards that we have aimed at research and targeting underserved populations. We have a couple, one that's wrapping up right now that dealt with Native American populations, and a couple others dealing with transition, especially youth as they transition and from minority groups. Next slide, please. So the programs and the philosophy, quoting right from the Rehab Act, to promote a philosophy of independent living, including consumer control, probably why I'm here today, peer support also, self-help, self-determination, equal access, and individual and system advocacy in order to maximize the leadership, empowerment, independence, and productivity of individuals with disabilities, and the integration and full inclusion of individuals with disabilities into the mainstream of American society. Next slide, please. Quick history. 1972, the Center for Independent Living was founded in Berkeley, first one. The next year, the Rehab Act passes. Not probably, I'm being sarcastic, sorry, absolutely one had to do with the other. If you ever watched the show, there's been numerous recounts of how that happened, but Crip Camp on Netflix talked a lot about how that passing of the act occurred. 5 years later, Rehab Act established federal funding for independent living. A year after that, first 10 states received Title VII funding. 1992, the Rehab Act is restructured, creates the SIL program, and SILs are established. The SIL program at the federal level is what we sometimes refer to as Part C. And then most recently in 2014, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is when OILP came over from Department of Ed to HHS. Long and storied history here. Okay, next slide, please. So we've talked about the philosophy, the culture, and the programs. You add those two together, you get the independent living program. Next slide, please. So we're going to start talking a little bit more about Centers for Independent Living. The other entities absolutely have consumer control. We're just, due to the audience and the time, we're focusing on SILs here. Centers for Independent Living are consumer-controlled, community-based, cross-disability, non-residential, private nonprofit agencies, so they're 501c3s, with significant people with significant disabilities, regardless of age or income. I can tell you that if you look at the data, it's predominantly people who are over 18, over 18 and under 65-ish. But it doesn't have to be that way. Any age, any disability, any severity can come in. I think it tends to flush out that way just because there's other large established systems for people under 18 and over 60-ish. But it doesn't have to be that way. We absolutely encourage SILs to collaborate and coordinate with any number of different community providers. So a couple things. The majority of the board must be persons with significant disabilities. This is absolutely people with disabilities in leadership positions in their agency. The majority of the staff and people in decision-making positions must also be individuals with disabilities. So it absolutely has to be people with disabilities leading efforts to help other people with disabilities increase their independence. And then the client, the consumer, is the person with a disability. That's who we're attempting to help grow and increase their independence. Next slide, please. Great. So what are the core services? The SILs must provide information and referral services. I'm going to go through these quickly, and I'm going to go back over more in depth. Independent living skills training, peer counseling, including cross-disability peer counseling, individuals and systems advocacy, and services that facilitate the transition from institutions to community living, diversion from institutions to community living, so getting out of a nursing home or not needing to go in, and transition of youth from secondary to post-secondary life. So quite literally, any person with any disability could come in the door, whether that's literally or via the phone or internet or chat or whatever, and ask a question where the answer is, here's some information and here are some people that can help you. That could be an internal referral, a referral to a service they did, but SILs often maintain pretty comprehensive understandings of what's going on in the community. No one organization can be everything to everybody, so a lot of times SILs are good contact points. Independent living skills training. Sometimes you need training. That could be anything from computer training to how to apply for or how to ride a bus or whatever. Peer counseling, a lot of what this is people who have had similar experiences, not necessarily the same disability, although that can happen, but who have similar experiences working with other people who are attempting to cross those same barriers and break down those same barriers. And we find that can be extremely powerful, which I'm sure you're very aware of. Individual and systems advocacy. Way back when, I used to run a center, and I used to describe this as sometimes information and referral, here's who to talk to, here's where to go, isn't enough. Sometimes you need to rattle the cage a little bit. And whether you're doing that on a person-by-person cases or across systems, that's definitely something that SILs do. And services that facilitate. As you can imagine, facilitating the transition can include all the other core services. You can provide information, referral, skills building, peer counseling, and advocacy as you're helping somebody transition. That's the core of what a SIL is, and it's important to remember at all times when this is going on, it's people with disabilities. Predominantly, the staff is at least 51% disabilities, and the board is at least 51% disabilities, people with disabilities leading the effort. So, next slide, please. So I'm going to start giving you a little bit of a bigger picture or more data-driven picture about what SILs are doing. It's a diverse population. Right now, it's 50, I shouldn't say right now. The last data we have, which was, I believe, fiscal year 18, 55% of the consumers were female, 48% identified as a minority, 43% were 25 to 59 years old, and 39% were 60 or over. Next slide, please. Who leads these programs? 76% of board members and 64% of staff had a significant disability. This is encouraging to me because it's significantly more than the legal requirement. Those numbers have to be at least 51%. And so the programs still are embracing this requirement and implementing it as not just a requirement, but as a way that they see is effective to provide services. Next slide, please. Services and goals. Services, goals are the tangible thing that you want to have improved in your independence. I want to be able to get to work. I want to be able to socialize, which could include learning how to ride the bus or prepare for an interview or whatever that SIL has decided that community needs. And the services are the specific actions by the SIL undertaken with the consumer to get that goal accomplished, right? SILs guide the discussions about these to what the consumer wants to accomplish. And it very much is hopefully, whenever reasonable, sort of a developmental process. You want the consumer to really come out of this with that self-advocacy kind of bent, understanding that sometimes there are emergencies and that's not 100% the focus. That's sort of the driving spirit. Next slide, please. So in that same year of data, the SILs across the country provided 837,623 core services. That's those areas. 379,347 other services. I didn't put the list of the other services because if literally you looked at that list and you added the core services, it's pretty much everything. You're really hard pressed to find something that a person with a disability would need to increase their independence that's either not under other or under core services. And this led to 72,708 goals met. Yay. Next slide, please. A couple of links here for additional resources. And you can also find out information about our most recent annual report. And there's a whole bunch of information on our SIL page, which will also link to more information about statewide independent living councils, DSEs, and other parts of that IL universe that we referred to. There you go. That's it.
Thank you, Sean. If we have any questions, folks can start to put those into the chat for Sean. I have a question while we wait for any others to come in, if you've got a moment, Sean.
Yep.
You use the term consumer control. And can you talk a little bit about maybe where that term comes from? In the TBI community, we talk about people with brain injuries, whether they're traumatic brain injuries or acquired brain injuries, and we talk about maybe being a brain injury survivor. And so I know it can get kind of confusing when there's all different terms that maybe mean the same thing or maybe mean something a little bit different.
Yeah, I think we mean that in literally as broad of a concept as you want to. The person with a disability that is seeking their independence to be improved. Leadership-wise, it's absolutely, we expect the board and the staff and the leadership positions to be at least 51% people with disabilities. So we expect that consumer, person with a disability seeking independence perspective is prevalent throughout the SIL. You should feel it when you receive services. The other thing that I think can be challenging at times is that the goal is to help improve that person's ability to direct and control and work with their life. And clearly that we have to respect the individual family dynamics and the realities of situations, and especially in some cultures. But the default position is that person is that consumer is the one who is, answering the questions and doing the homework and providing the feedback. And, if we're in a meeting and there's 12 people in the room, they're the one we're talking to. That kind of dynamic. Does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you so much. And we have a question that just came into the chat that says, can you give us some information about the homeless population and disability and how to get help for them?
The short answer is unfortunately not really. I think it's a great question because I think that there is a high prevalence of disability. Does homelessness lead to disability, or does disability lead to homeless? I don't know, but if you're there, that's what came first, you know. That's literally not a statistic that we track. It's not something grantees are forced to report. Forced is the wrong word, but you know what I mean, that they need to report to us. So I can't give you a concrete answer. I can tell you that I believe that homelessness is one of those areas where partnerships really blossom or are beneficial, because there might be a homeless centers or shelters or transition facilities or whatever that don't necessarily have extensive disability experience or are completely overwhelmed, that would benefit strongly from partnering with local disability organizations like SILs. I know that when I ran a SIL, we had a housing specialist, and we maintained we were active participants in things like homeless task forces and local shelter boards and those type of things.
Wonderful. And I want to emphasize again that you mentioned that these are non-residential programs. I think that's something that can get a little confusing.
Correct.
You know, independent living, you might think it's a place where you actually physically go to live, and that's not the case for these programs.
Correct. No.
Excellent. And just one more question while I wait and see if any other questions come into the chat here. Can you give maybe, I know it'll differ depending on what SIL you're at, but what would maybe a regular process look like if somebody with a traumatic brain injury came into a SIL?
And I like how you preface that.
I knew what
It's
your
not really
answer
a
was
normal
going to be
process.
already.
Yeah. Generally speaking, I think that depending on the specificity of your question, right? So if your question was, you know, how do I contact the local transportation provider for a reduced fare permit, then that might just be here's a phone number. But if it's more complicated than that, and even hopefully part of that is that you would meet with the staff person and would help identify the larger goal that you're trying to accomplish and think through the steps necessary to get there, and then build a plan. There's literally a thing called an independent living plan that would hopefully be the end product of that. And understanding that every individual is different. Sorry, Russell Spearman asked a great question. I'll get to that in a second. In that you would cater the specifics to the person, and maybe they don't even know the answer right away. Maybe they need to attend some peer groups and develop it over time. Maybe they know exactly what they want. They just want someone to help them sit down and write a plan. But our hope is that it's always a balance. I mean, you don't want to make someone go through a long, drawn out process if there's a quick question, right? If there's a quick answer. But you also want to make sure that you look at you know, the full sort of spectrum and the social determinants of health, and make sure that everything that the person might need is there. We find quite often, not quite often, but sometimes that these are sort of long-term processes, which is fine. I mean, people go through different parts of their lives and have different priorities and what have you. So hopefully you meet with a qualified professional who helps you identify and work through your goals, identify the services, and then comes up with a plan based on those to help you reach the goal. That's the brochure answer.
Wonderful, thank you. And you saw this question that popped up from Russ here, if you want to go ahead and take it.
Yeah, you know, Russ, frankly, I think they're in the same universe. I think one probably, one is very closely related to the other. It's hard to answer for me, because when I think of independent living, because of what I do for a living, I think of definitions and legal stuff. And as I mentioned, it's also rooted in the philosophy. I bet if they were in a family, they'd be close brothers and sisters. I don't know, maybe cousins. I think that IL philosophy tends to be something that is more, I don't know, they're super closely related. Maybe the answer is spelling. I think that's how they're different. You can't have one without the other. There's my answer. You can't be IL without person-centeredness, or vice versa. Should I just answer the next question?
That'd be wonderful if you wouldn't mind reading it and then answering it.
Great. Can you talk a bit about your philosophy of the SILs related to screening? I understand that some within the SILs feel screening for brain injury is not maybe the right way to go, as you should be addressing them as individuals, not by their disability. However, if you do not know someone who has a brain injury, supports can be missed. Thoughts? Well, I can talk about my philosophy. One of the things that I keep saying is there's 352 SILs. So there's probably 352 slight variations on the answer to this question from SILs. I think it's a challenge. I think that SILs very much are about addressing the systemic issues and about helping people get to where the independence they need to be. But at the same time, I think you make a very valid point, which about needing supports, which is there's a direct correlation between how aware you are of your challenges and how effective you can develop strategies to address your challenges to being independent. So there was I think it was, Dana, it was with you. I think it was this group where a SIL director talked about that last month or something, and mentioned how originally they were hesitant, and then after reaching out and talking with the TBI community, they were able to develop and implement a screening pool. Frankly, I think that's like most things. Get to know your local people, talk about it. Approaching that as helping you identify the tools necessary to identify the critical supports is probably a good way to approach that for SILs if you're reaching out to us.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a couple of SILs that have implemented some brain injury screening techniques, and we know how critical screening is to people, particularly if you don't know whether or not you have a brain injury or not, and that can really answer a lot of questions. Well, wonderful. We are right at time here. So thank you again so much for your time. If folks do have other questions for Sean that pop up later, we can be sure to direct them to him. And if not, I will go ahead and turn things back over to Ashley.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Dana. And thank you so much, Sean, for that great presentation and all that wonderful information. Our next agenda item, the ACL Advisory Board Work Group is going to be doing a presentation and walkthrough on some of the activities and products that we have been working on during this grant cycle. And so I am going to pass the mic over to Miss Amanda Accord-Vara, who is with the University of West Virginia Centers for Excellence in Disabilities, TBI service program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. So hello and welcome. My name is Amanda. I am a white female with shoulder-length blonde hair. I am wearing a navy sweater and a white shirt, and behind me the walls are a tan color, and I have a small filing cabinet to my right. Next slide, please. So we wanted to start off this segment by offering a brief definition of what an advisory board is. And this is important because the TBI Act stipulates that state programs establish an advisory board. So in essence, an advisory board is a group of people that advise and make recommendations to the state on ways to improve services coordination regarding TBI. Such advisory boards shall encourage citizen participation through the establishment of public hearings and other types of community outreach programs. In developing recommendations under this paragraph, such boards shall consult with federal, state, and local governmental agencies and with citizens, groups, and other private entities. Next slide, please. So we wanted to kind of give an overview of what our work group's been doing and who it's comprised of and what the purpose of it is. So ACL, the Administration for Community Living Traumatic Brain Injury Partnership Grant Program, awarded grants to both mentor and partner states. And this is a comprehensive list of the different states that participated in our developing of our tools and products. 2 additional states, Virginia and California, showed interest in this work group and also joined our work group throughout this last 3 years. So back in 2018, we started working on the different products that we wanted to complete during this time period. The purpose of the toolkit that we had decided to develop was so that it would be useful to states that were either developing an advisory board for the first time or they wanted to enhance their current advisory board. So we scheduled meetings monthly, and we first identified what components we thought were most important for an advisory board. Then we divided this into subgroups, different states, depending on what their strengths and interest and experience were with the various components. Those subgroups developed the initial draft of the components that you're going to hear about today. After they developed the initial draft, it was brought back to the whole group, edits and revisions were made, and then the final version was added to the toolkit. We also know that as time changed and things change, we needed a way to assess this toolkit so that changes could be made in the future. So we'll also talk about a toolkit survey that will be included at the end of this presentation that will be included in our toolkit. Next slide, please. So these are the 2 main things we're going to talk about today. So the big one is the Traumatic Brain Injury Advisory Board Toolkit. We'll also be discussing the full participation guidelines. Next slide, please. So the primary intentions or the goals of the TBI Advisory Board Toolkit was that any state could use this, whether they were just starting one or if they already had a current advisory board that was up and operational. We also wanted to make sure that it was applicable to states, whether they were legislatively or governor appointed, as well as community organized boards. And with each of the components, we wanted to be able to provide guidance on infrastructure to help create systems that would benefit individuals with brain injuries and their families, and also offer best practices for fully engaging all members of advisory boards. Next slide, please. So these are the 14 components that are listed in our toolkit. We include things on board member job descriptions, creating bylaws, mission statements, agenda templates, language within government, recruitment techniques, tips and tricks, example board compositions, important partners, simplified Robert's Rules of Order, orientation plan for new board members, meeting federal recommendations and requirement, funding resources, and full participation guidelines. So we've highlighted the ones in red because we're going to briefly summarize those and discuss those in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So the first one that we've chosen to talk about today was the mission statement. A mission statement is just a concise explanation of the reason the board is in existence. It provides the ideal vision of the board and helps with strategic direction. It is different, though, from a vision statement because a vision statement describes the future intent or outcomes for a community in addition to just the organization. Mission statements are usually concise, they're outcome-oriented, they're inclusive, they show the value in what the board can bring and do. They're credible, and they're also motivating. When you're developing a mission statement, there are 4 questions: what the organization does, how they do it, who they do it for, and what value are they bringing. So the toolkit, the component here, will also, we always say, I would like some examples of that. So it also does include examples from different states, TBI advisory boards, as well as the Brain Injury Organization and additional corporate and nonprofit companies, their mission statements. Next slide, please. So from that, finding the right people to serve on an advisory board requires there to be a process in place. So we really wanted to, bring to attention the recruitment techniques. It's more than just selection of members. It also includes the process of how you're going to solicit nominations, identify what potential members, and actually recruiting them. One of the first things that you need to consider is to determine what skills and experience that the board needs to accomplish their goals. But you also need to consider if there's bylaws, because the bylaws often have certain membership requirements of who's required to be on your board. It is also important to figure out a system for how you're going to identify the potential members who qualify for the position. Where are you going to post them? How long are you going to post? Is it certain times of the year? And you also want to refer to your bylaws because it may be a requirement. You also want to be able to vet different people that may or may not qualify at that time. Sometimes you may be looking for specific skills or sets and someone may apply, and it may not be the best time for them, but it may be something in the future as your goals and directions change that you would want to consider. It is also important to ensure diverse cultural representation on your board. It is also recommended that there's a standardized nomination form that would be used for recruiting new members. So all new members would have the same experience and you would gather the same information when making the selection of who's going to be on your board. Next slide, please. So after you have selected the members, the next critical piece is having an orientation plan in place for new members. It can be overwhelming when you come onto a new board because there's a lot of rules and requirements and regulations that you may need to be aware of. One way to do that is you identify a person or a welcoming committee that's responsible for organizing and implementing the orientation plan for new members. And that process would continue until the new member feels that they have captured the information that they need to be able to serve on the board adequately. It is also recommended that new members fill out a survey prior to this first orientation meeting. So this way that the person in charge or the group that's in charge is aware of individual needs, which will allow the members to be able to fully participate. And then that way adjustments and things can be made as needed. So in this orientation, we also offered best promising practices. So some of those is new member learning and accommodations, but also having the other members introduce themselves, what the members' interests are and their strengths, the state's brain injury service network, operations for the board, and so on. We've also provided different examples. So there's example of a structure of orientation and also a needs survey that you may want. We've also identified some known gaps that you may want to consider for your orientation of your new board members. So next, I would like to introduce Paula Denslow. She is a certified brain injury specialist and has been with the Tennessee Disability Coalition since 2003 as the director of 2 federal grant-funded programs. So thank you, Paula.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate it. My name is Paula, and I am a middle-aged Caucasian woman with shoulder-length light brown hair. And today I'm wearing shades of navy blue. And I also have my glasses on today that are rimmed in red. The next toolkit component I wanted to highlight today is the one on important partners. Our work group recommends that states consider aligning with partners to address specific critical issues that have an impact on services, supports, and needs of people with brain injury. Flexibility and understanding of shared missions and goals should guide the role to identifying key partners. Next slide, please. Full participation guidelines is our 14th component within the toolkit. The vision of the full participation guide was to support the development of advisory boards, hosting meetings and events. However, it was never intended to be limited to just that. A little background on this document is historically, the federal TBI program required grantees to bring a person with a brain injury, a family member, or a caregiver who was actively involved in our grant project. My role then and currently is as a professional. However, I am also engaged as a parent and family member of someone with a brain injury navigating these systems. For the federal grantee meetings, I looked at attending these from both perspectives. For me, there was not a clear agenda or best way to support the individual that joined me as my guest to attend these meetings. Many other grantees felt the same way. However, but in lieu of those discussions, many ideas came to be, and the full participation guideline was a component that was derived from a focus group that the federal TBI program put together. It was comprised of several people, family members, people with brain injuries, myself included, and we worked for over 2 years to create, design, and put best practice on paper so that we could move the federal TBI program to a new level. As a result, enhancements to this program, to this document, included orientations for new members. Meeting agendas and documents were created as color-coded tools and resources for everyone. We even, everything was a teachable moment. So the hotels or meeting space venues were educated on how to properly interact with people with all disabilities. Signage was looked at, both digital signs and placements of signs that were throughout the hotel. The actual meetings themselves, time was extended or broadened to allow for people to navigate from one meeting space to another, and also to open the opportunity to engage with each other during that time. Designated quiet areas were put in place. And again, a communication of all of these changes and enhancements to the program were effectively communicated across all of the grantees. In 2020, through the help of Maria Crowley and the TBI Advisory Leadership Group, the TUL group, we brought this document back to life, reviewed it, and now we felt as part of the advisory board toolkit, it was extremely vitally important to add this component. Just to reiterate that the full participation guidelines is a resource to be used throughout all areas, not only in creating advisory boards, but if you're hosting a meeting, if you're hosting an event, a conference, or just a simple get-together with professionals, these are things to keep in mind. Next slide, please. And building a solid foundation is extremely important, as we've talked about through all of our efforts with TBI Tuesdays, is create an environment and work towards applying practices conducive to achieving the goal of full participation. We all treat those as you would like to be treated. Feel like you're welcoming someone into your home as a guest at your table, and set the stage for that. My last favorite thing is use a checklist. We all find it very, very helpful when we can check off those boxes and move on to the next thing. But setting the stage and environment for everyone to be able to come to the table, share their views and opinions, and carry the work forward is a strength. So we found it important to add this to the toolkit. And one final note before I hand it back over to Ashley is that each one of the 14 components will be standalone documents. The evaluation we're going to learn a little bit more about is on every component. The components are multiple pages in length, each one, and at the moment our toolkit is with the editor, so it will look different as when the final version comes out, but it is within weeks, if not days, if not weeks, for completion. So I just wanted to add that few little notes to that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ashley.
Thank you so much, Paula and Amanda. We're going to move on into talking about self-advocacy and lived experience. If we could go on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So when talking about TBI advisory boards and the TBI community, self-advocates and advocates are a huge important component. And one thing that is very important is remembering to have about 50% of TBI advisory boards to have individuals with lived experience, family members, caregivers, persons with brain injury, so that they are able to represent the board and the community. And this is a wonderful transition into talking about our next agenda item. And we are actually going to be able to have a facilitated discussion with two individuals who have lived experiences and are on TBI advisory boards. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So I am going to introduce Rodney Smith, who is a board member with the West Virginia Traumatic Brain Injury Program, and Pam Bryan, who is a board member on the Tennessee TBI Advisory Council. If we could go ahead and pull up Rodney and Pam, we can go ahead and start with the panel discussion. Hi, Rodney.
Hi.
Hi, Pam.
Hey, there I am.
There we go. Perfect. So we're just going to quickly start out with Rodney. If you could just introduce yourself and share a little snippet of your story.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to share just a snippet of the journey. it's pretty long journey there. My name's Rodney Smith. My brain injury occurred with a motorcycle accident in the state of Georgia in 2008. And it's been an interesting ride ever since then. Initially, we didn't know what was wrong with me. My wife, when I had the wreck and came home, I wasn't the same guy that left for work that day. And I never did make it to work that day either, or ever did again for that matter. But we bounced around the medical system for about 2.5 months until we had a neurologist who didn't know what to do with me, but she knew somebody who did, and referred me to the Shepherd Center in Atlanta, Georgia. And we got there in August of 2008, and things changed immediately because they know what they're doing. It's the place to go. And it was a big turnaround for me. So it was actually several years, or at least a few years anyway, before I had confidence and the ability to awareness of everything, to actually know that I wanted to do something to help people who had the same kind of situation that I was in. In 2014, circumstances caused us to have to move back to West Virginia because of my wife's parents and such things. So we were here a few years, and then I got the itch to get involved. I started a blog, hopeaftertbi.net. And I also applied to the West Virginia Traumatic Brain Injury Waiver Council and joined the council in 2016. And like the second meeting they elected me as chair of the council. So that was kind of interesting. And the brain injury bit me the next month, because the very next meeting, the first meeting I was going to be the chair, I forgot and I didn't show up. So the brain injury was still there, but I continued. And ever since then, I've been at all the meetings and doing a decent job. In 2018, they suggested that I apply to be a survivor representative at the NASHIA conference in Iowa. And I applied for that and was accepted for it. And at the same time that I applied for that, they said, you ought to apply to be on the advisory board as well. So I did that as well and was accepted for that. that's how I got involved with the advisory board. Initially it was Sarah Miller, but now Amanda and Miranda Talkington are the ones who kind of run that council and the board and stuff. So I just want to do everything I can to help people avoid a lot of the stuff that I went through or had to go through to finally get somewhere where I could get help. So that's kind of the short story.
Thank you so much, Rodney, for telling us your story. What a journey. And Pam, if you would like to just take a few minutes and tell us your story.
Excuse me. Please excuse me ahead of time because my allergies are crazy. So I may have to clear my throat and cough and all that all that stuff. But and I'm with Rodney. It's going to be hard to put all our years into the few minutes, but I'm going to do it. Our journey started it'll be 26 years this Halloween. My son was 13 years old at the time. His name's John. And he was coming home from school. We had a carpool set up and the mother ran off the road and hit a telephone pole head on, just less than a mile from our house. He was life flighted to Vanderbilt Hospital and the police came to pick me up and drove me to the hospital with the lights and sirens going. I knew at that time, this is bad. Please don't do that. This is bad. So when I got there and the nurse was telling me all of John's injuries, which he had many, including a spinal cord injury. But when they told me about his brain injury, I really had not heard of that. I was like, what? He hurt his brain? I mean, what is that? And they said, well, he's in a coma right now. Well, I wasn't worried about that anymore because what I knew of coma was what I'd seen on TV, and he would sleep for a few days and then wake up and everything would be fine. I soon learned that was not the case. He had a severe brain injury. Over the years, it was our journey went through many hills and mountains to get over. As a matter of fact, about 3 weeks ago, we had another hill we had to get over because of a lot of his medical needs as well as his brain injury. But it's taken me places I never thought I would go. It was taking me places as a caregiver I thought I would never do. I always say caregivers have an inner strength they never knew they have, and it's so true. It's taken me in places as a volunteer on many national as well as local advisory councils, as well as employment within the disability community and TBI community. So it's not the path me or my son would have chosen, but it's been a good path. It's been a good path. It's led in many different directions, but it's been good.
Thank you so much, Pam, for sharing your story. But let me just say, John is such a delight to be around. I got to meet him when I first started this position. We went to the local Olive Garden and we had lunch together. We had such a great time. So Rodney, can you tell us how, once again, how you were recruited to the advisory board, and was there an orientation process after your appointment on your advisory board?
I'm not exactly sure who, being on the Waiver Council, there's a lot of people that are on that council as well that are also on the advisory board. So I'm thinking some of those people thought that I would be a good fit at some time, probably why they recommended me for the NASHIA conference as well. But the orientation was kind of, for me, was at the NASHIA conference. I spent a week with the leaders of the advisory board and got to know an awful lot about it there. But at the meetings, we go over all the introductions. They tell you, everybody tells you what they do and what their function is with the board and what they want to accomplish and things like that. I got all the documentation when I first started out and things like that. That's a lot of reading when you first get into it and stuff. But the main orientation was spending a week with Sarah and Teresa, and those Amanda would know these folks from all her time with the board as well.
Thank you so much, Rodney. Pam, can you tell us how maybe you were recruited to the board, and if there was an onboarding or an orientation process when you first started on the board?
Yeah, I really guess I could say I started as being a attendee at the council meetings 16 years ago. It was when my son became, as I said, he was 13, but when he graduated from high school and he became an adult, especially with all his medical needs, I was lost. It was a whole different world out there, from everything from changing from pediatric doctors to adult doctors was a whole different ballgame, to what services and stuff was out there. So the first thing I really did was contact the TBI state program at that time. And they told me, you should go to a support group meeting, which I did. And that's where I met what would start as my mentor, but became my best friend, Paula Denslow. Paula, you too, but I'll get to you in a minute. Sue Shaw. Sue was also a parent of a son with a brain injury, and we went to lunch, and it was so refreshing to talk to someone who completely understood. And so she kind of guided me. She told me, you should start attending the advisory council meetings. You should go to the Brain Injury Association of Tennessee's board meetings, kind of hear what's going on in the brain injury world. But before I could even go to my first meeting, my wonderful friend invited me to be on the BIAT, Brain Injury Association of Tennessee's board. And I took Paula Denslow's place as the treasurer. I was scared to death. I had never been on any kind of board, any kind of nonprofit, any kind of anything. But Paula made it so easy for the transition. I really appreciate that. And we become best friends as well. Unfortunately, Sue has passed away. I miss her dearly. But that's how I became involved. So after becoming a volunteer on the Brain Injury Association Tennessee, and eventually worked up to executive director, and then once leaving that, I thought, well, you know what? I think I would like to actually serve on the council. I've been there, I've offered the comments and the guest comments, and I want to be a part of this. I want my voice to be heard. So when a Middle Tennessee position opened up for a family member, I applied. And so I'm in the second year of my second term. So I've been on the council going on 4 years now. I've enjoyed every moment of it. And when I first started, Jean Doster was the director at that time, and she did do an orientation with me. We also, we went to Olive Garden. That seems to be our go-to place. There was a booklet that she had with all the information in it. We went over that, even though I had been involved all these years, and I almost knew, I'd given updates on BI to them. I needed to really know what I was expected of as a council member. So that was very beneficial to me. Oh, I can't hear.
Sorry about that. Thank you so much, Pam. Rodney, can you tell us, why is it important to have individuals with lived experience, persons with brain injuries, caregivers, and family members on the advisory board?
Well, the key thing is the lived experience. We have lived it. We know what we have been through. We understand it, and somebody who hasn't been through it doesn't really understand it. I mean, they can read all they want about it, but that's what I call head knowledge as opposed to heart knowledge. So I think it's more real world input, and you feel like you're making a difference for somebody in your same situation that's been through what you've been through, and you want to make sure that what they may be going through, you can convey that to people who can actually do something about it.
Yes, exactly. If it's hard for individuals who are on the board that do not have this lived experience to actually speak for people that do have the lived experience. We can't do that. So I agree, it's very, very important to have our TBI, our persons with TBI and our caregivers and family members on advisory boards. Pam, can you quickly maybe tell us what you think maybe the most challenging part of being on an advisory board is?
Not being, as Paula says, not being able to save the world. Just want to save everybody. And I would say the biggest challenge is that I would just love to have so much funding that we could just help everyone and not have to worry about it. So to me, that's the biggest challenge. I want to help everyone that we possibly can help, but you feel that you're limited in that resource. And unfortunately, that's the way of everyone. You know, it's not just TBI community, it's everyone. But to me, that's the biggest challenge. It's just wanting the funds to do what we would love to do.
Right. Funding that's always at the top of everybody's list.
Yes. Yes.
Just one more question before we wrap up this panel. Rodney, would you maybe tell us what maybe your favorite part about being on the TBI advisory board in your state is?
Well, it's a bunch of good people. It's a bunch of people there that care. It really impressed me that they do care as much as they do. And all the time at different meetings and different things like that, I'll ask somebody, what's their passion? Why are you involved in this? And get their answer back as to a family member. Maybe they were a survivor or something like that. But that's a big part of it. And feeling like you're actually making a difference and helping somebody who is in your situation. It's a way to get into the field. And since they need voting members, I'm going to be a voting member and say what I can say and make sure that they have enough members to make enough influence the state to do what needs done.
Right. Yes, that is a very that's one of the reasons that I enjoy serving on advisory boards that I do serve on as well. I just want to say thank you so much to Rodney and Pam for joining us today on this webinar and being a part of this panel discussion. We are actually going to move on to Lucy Cordell to talk about the evaluation for the toolkit. And at the end, if we have a few more minutes for questions, if you could just put your questions in the chat box for Pam and Rodney, we will be sure to get those answered for you. Thank you so much. I think we're ready for the presentation.
Thank you.
Pop back on.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm Lucy. I'm a research professional in Alaska, and I am a white female with brown hair. I have a white top on, and I have a dark blue background. And I'm going to tell you a little about the evaluation for the advisory board toolkit. So at the end of each toolkit component, there is a link to a very brief survey where you can leave feedback for that component. And we really want this feedback for improvement purposes. So could you move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Yes, and just to show you that it is a pretty painless survey, we have listed all of the questions here. So it starts with some basic questions about your advisory board, And then question 6 is where you can select which component or section you wish to leave feedback on. And so in my example, I selected the bylaws component. So these final 3 questions are the same questions asked for every component. We have a rating scale. We ask what was particularly helpful. And we want to know if there is any information that we should add to improve the toolkit. We really want the toolkit to be as helpful as possible for people. And so we purposefully made the survey so brief and straightforward, really in the hope to increase participation and to get us more feedback. And yes, that was my very little piece about the evaluation. You can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. So I think we're going to move on now to a bit of a facilitated discussion about some of the products that we've heard discussed. And I should introduce myself. I am the disembodied voice that you've heard a few times throughout the presentation here. My name is Dana Fink. I'm one of the project officers for the Traumatic Brain Injury State Partnership Program here at ACL. I'm a Caucasian young woman with brown curly hair. I'm wearing a blue and green sweater, and I've just got a plain white background going on in the back here. So we want to, you've heard about both the toolkit as well as the full participation guidelines. So we can kind of make this conversation open to both of those. And I know the link was put in for the full participation guidelines. We don't have the full toolkit available yet at this time, but we just wanted to hear from some of you guys about what you've heard about these products so far. Is there anything that really stood out to you from what you've heard about them? And thank you, Terry, has put the link in again for the full participation guidelines if you want to pull those up at this time. So I really just want to open the conversation up to see what makes sense about it to you, if you envision using it, how you might use it in your own work, anything that you think might be missing in it. Give folks a moment or two to start putting information into the chat. I'm really excited about both the toolkit and the full participation guidelines. I think it was, I forget who mentioned the full participation guidelines, that they're applicable not just to advisory council meetings, but to any session that you might be having. And that's something, you know, this session is really focused on advisory councils, but the work group itself is focused on advisory councils and full survivor engagement. And so we really envision a method for how these traumatic brain injury services and supports can start to be more person-centered and service directly to people with lived experience. So we're excited to have products that tackle both the advisory boards as well as the fuller picture there. So I'll open the floor up to anyone with questions. Anyone who's interested in learning more about the toolkit, any questions you have?
Dana, if I may, this is Paula Denslow chiming in.
Yes, please, come on.
Thank you. I appreciate the open discussion. I, again, just wanted to reiterate to everyone that the visual that you're looking at of the toolkit itself is in the development stage. All the components have been completed. They are all accessible. They will be standalone documents. And the actual toolkit will be electronic as well, but it will look and feel a little bit different than the picture that is on our screen at the moment.
Thanks, Paula.
Mm-hmm.
We can also open this conversation up a little bit for anyone who is on an advisory council or runs an advisory council or similar board or commission, any experiences that you've had? There seems to be an issue with the link. It says the link of the full presentation slide seems to be the wrong one. Would you mind posting again? Sure, I'll see. I think Terry can put that in for you again there. There's a comment here that says changing the number of survivors and family members on the council will take legislative changes. Yes, absolutely. That's a really good point. Thank you, Janice. Anyone who is a grantee of ACL, a Traumatic Brain Injury State Partnership Program, that's a grantee of ACL, we require you to make 50% of your advisory council be people with brain injury. In addition to that, we anticipate other members with lived experience, family members, caregivers, et cetera, in addition to that 50%. And we know that a lot of that can take some legislative changes. We give people these programs time to ramp up to that. Anyone who's a current grantee has had these last 3 years to ramp up to putting those changes in effect. And we know it can be a slow process. There's a question in here, are these applicable to state affiliate brain injury association groups as well, or only ACL funded groups? Given the difficulty in assembly and sustainability, it would be great to combine efforts. Do you recommend combining efforts? That is a very good question. We know there are lots of groups from the Brain Injury Association, the U.S. Brain Injury Alliance as well. There's a lot of overlap with these groups and maybe with some of the advisory councils. But Traumatic Brain Injury Partnership Program receives funding. In the legislation, you're required to have an advisory council. So that is something that has to be a standalone piece, and you have to have that in effect in order to receive funding as a grantee. And so often those are based, within legislative offices. Got a comment here from Anne from Montana. And says, I'm very excited to learn more about the toolkit, as I think it will be quite helpful. I agree with the concerns about changing things from a legislative perspective. In our state is by governor appointment. The council members do have input, although we try to recruit by recommending people apply for appointment. Yep, absolutely. And we know, legislative change can change culture, and culture can make legislative change. So we kind of try to hit that from both angles there. We hope that by ACL stressing the importance of this, that we know that all of our grantees have recognized the importance of this as well. And we hope that message will then trickle into state legislatures and be able to make those changes so that people with lived experience can be the prevailing voices on their advisory councils. I'm wondering if any of the folks want to come back on who spoke earlier about the components of the toolkit, the pieces that you outlined earlier, just to remind people what those pieces were. I know it was 20-30 minutes ago that we talked about those.
Yeah, let me bring them back up so I have them handy here.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Well, this is Paula, and I will like to say again that when this work group first started, we came to the table and looked at what each of the states participating in this work group had for an advisory council, what their personal experience was in their own state. We reached out to all of the states to see what is happening across the country. And then we started to put all the pieces together of an effective advisory board. every component was built being person-centered, with meaningful opportunities for people to come to the table with different concerns. The work group itself, as Amanda shared when she went into, which Amanda, you might already be wanting to do this, go back in the table of contents, but the breakdown, we divided and conquered each one of these components. A group of states worked diligently on putting this work together, so that we could then organize it in a way that Terry at HSRI could assist us with the help of TARC and put all of this toolkit together in one spot as a guide. But there was, it's just really been, you can't believe that 3 years has gone by so quickly. But then when you look at all of these different aspects, and we did reinvent the wheel. There are other states. There are so many states out there doing phenomenal work in the TBI community, but across all disabilities, all of our communities.
If we want to go back to the slide of the table of contents, I could just give like a brief kind of overview of the different components, if that would be helpful.
That would be wonderful, Amanda. Connor, are you able to bring that back up? Thank you. There it is.
All right, thank you. Okay, so the board member, because we didn't talk about the ones that aren't highlighted quite as much in red, so I'll just kind of go over them, just give a little brief kind of summary of what each of them includes. So the first one is board member job descriptions. In that, we identified positions within the board along with different essential requirements and responsibilities of the board members, and gave some examples of what that may be. And, sometimes that may be different between whether you have a governor appointed or a legislative one or a community one, but usually there are some similarities, like you have somebody in charge and you have the members and things like that. So there is some guidance on that. The second one is bylaws, and this is descriptions and examples of the rules used by boards or councils in various states. And so there's also, in all of these, there's some examples that we have found, and a lot of times the people that were on these groups were the ones who had either experience in their state with them or knowledge or expertise in these areas. So we tried to capture that and bring that together with each of the components, so that it would be applicable to many states. The mission statement, it includes proposed plan of accomplishments and or your statement or purpose. This is that concise statement that kind of gave that overview of what your organization is going to do. It's a concise statement. There's also agendas, which that will identify common topics that could be discussed along with sample agendas and time frame recommendations for meetings. So even, in our own advisory board, we're like, what are the topics that we should discuss? What should be kind of standard in every meeting? What do we want to make sure that we capture and that people are expecting that we report on each meeting and things like that. So gave a sample agenda about how that may look and things that you may want to include. Language within government identifies the different language if the advisory board is legislatively established or not legislatively established. Differentiates between board, council, and other similar titles. Sometimes the language can be a little bit confusing. If you come from a state that's community and then, you're wanting to make it maybe legislatively governed or governor appointed, it just gives us some more information about that for states who are in one or the other or want to learn more about other ones. Recruitment techniques. This one describes techniques to identify and recruit new members. And we talked about this one a little bit, but you want to be able to identify people that would meet what your mission is. And so to do that, you need to have a process in place on how you want to recruit. And you also want to make sure that you have that same experience available to everyone so that people know how to apply, where to apply, and what the expectations are when you apply for a board. The tips and tricks. This identifies successful strategies to involve and engage members. also to ensure attendance, meet accessibility requirements, and other helpful techniques. So we talked about attendance in some of these, because it's really important not only to be a board member, but also you want to make sure that you're participating in that board. So we spent a lot of time talking about attendance and how and what, are the expectations for that. So you'll find some of that kind of, sprinkled throughout some of the different components. But this tips and tricks is just giving you, some strategies and things that you may want to use within your own board. And once again, I just want to reiterate, these are applicable, of course, not only just to advisory boards, but that was our primary focus here. But could be used with a variety of boards and, regardless of whether they're community or legislative or governor based. Example board composition. This identifies examples of individuals within the community who would be valuable to the board makeup. Sometimes in some states that is mandated for them who's going to be on the board. Sometimes it's not. So this just gives you an example of individuals that you may want to consider, whether it's, individuals with traumatic brain injury and then families and caregivers, but also professionals in the field who may bring, something to the table about what's available in your state. Important partners, Paula went over that, but just in summary, it explains the importance of having people with brain injury as board members, along with identifying what partners can represent with the critical issues in your state. So that's really important. You want to make sure that people who have lived experiences are on your committee because they're the ones who have lived it. But you also want to have some professionals that do provide services in the area so that you can capture what's available in your state. The simplified Robert's Rules of Orders options. This identifies and explains Robert Rules of Orders and offers a simplified variation. I know even in our own board, that was kind of overwhelming at first. It's like, what is Robert's Rules? How do you use it? What are the, the rules and things for using that? So this just gave individuals a chance to have kind of a more simplified version and kind of what some of the expectations are. 11 was the orientation plan for new board members. I think this is really important because taking on a new position on a board, it's a little scary at first because you don't know what all is expected of you, what the requirements are. And there's a lot of information out there that, isn't always readily available. I know that even, when I've started new work groups or new boards or things like that, just trying to find the information sometimes is, a little tricky. So the thought of you want to develop this orientation plan so that when you bring new members on, you want to do that so that you facilitate success. And the way you do that is to let them know what's expected of them and how to access the things that they need. So for the orientation, you want to identify specific trainings that you expect all members to go through and content that would be useful in preparing new members for the service. Number 12 is meeting federal recommendations and requirements. And this component identifies and describes how to ensure that you are meeting the federal recommendation for council composition, specifically for legislatively mandated or governor appointed boards. So what we did in that section is we kind of outlined what some of the different, we found different states and found what some of their requirements and things were. And we summarize those things. And even if you have a community-based one, you may also want to make that part of your board, even if it isn't legislatively or governor appointed, because it's things about, who do you want to be a member? What are your expectations about attending meetings? How often do you have meetings? And things like that. So it kind of gives you a guide, kind of like, I would say more like I like to think of it as like a policy and procedure about how your boards are going to run. And so that's a good tool. Even if it's not federally recommended, you can still use a lot of the same things that are in there. They even talk about how, like voting for who your chairperson or who your president or whatever you want to call them, the leader of your organization, like how do you go about that? How do you vote for different things? So it does give a lot of good examples. Funding resources, number 13. This provides description on identifying and securing allocated funding or other sources within the state for specific items within an advisory board. Some boards do have funding and some don't. And so if there are things that you need funding for, then it talks about some different ways to do that. And then the last thing was the full participation guidelines, which Paula, do you want to give a quick overview about anything on that one?
Use it. I don't mean to be funny about that. It's very comprehensive, but it can be very simple. Again, it's when we were designing it originally, it was really a group of people with a shared interest, vested interest in improving the quality of everyday living for people and how they can best work and learn to navigate within a system, and how to do that. How can we how can we come to the table? As with anything, when we are asked to participate on an advisory board or part of a parent-teacher organization or a co-workers meeting, we have to be as prepared as we can. We have to understand who else is coming to the table. And then we form those relationships and things like that. Amanda, when you just touched on the funding resources and the difference of some have community funding, some are legislatively funded. But when you think about all that we've talked about over the TBI Tuesdays, there's a solid theme going on about sustainable partnerships. You can make partnerships at the grocery store, at the corner market. You can just everywhere. It does not have to be a service delivery system. It can be started with that shared interest of knowing someone that has a brain injury. It could be yourself or a loved one or a stranger. But again, it's that shared interest. So the full participation guidelines, it fits in all areas, not only the advisory board toolkit. It seemed like a natural fit for us to include it in this toolkit.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Paula. We are at time for our break right now. We're actually a little over time. I did put a few questions into the chat so folks can be thinking about that as we go to the break. And if you want to, add some comments in while we're on break or as we come back from break, please feel free to do so. We are a little over break, and I want to give everyone the full time for the break. It's so important that we take that time. So we're going to come back actually at 2:55 Eastern time. And when we come back, we will hear about how people with brain injury, well, how all people, but in particular people with brain injury, can become board ready to serve on a board. So we will go ahead and go to break now. We'll play some music for you. Feel free also to, if you don't want to listen to the music, sign off, sign back on, and we'll reconvene at 2:55 Eastern time. Thank you, everyone. All right, well, this is Dana again, and we're going to come on back from break now. While we were at break, a couple of things came into the chat. One comment from Danny says that something that came up while we were developing the bylaws for our council in Alaska is to use the democratic rules of order instead of Robert's rules of order because they're easier to follow. That's very interesting. I'm not familiar with democratic rules of order, but I do know Robert's rules of order can be quite complicated, quite intimidating for folks who are unfamiliar with them, for sure. And then we have another comment that came in from Carrie, and I am not equipped to answer this question, but maybe folks who are working the intersection of the court systems and traumatic brain injury might be able to answer the question. I'll just read it aloud here. Do you know if there are any advisory boards in any state that serve in their state to their governor concerning our disabled, especially brain injured, and monitoring of special considerations treatment in our court system? In my limited research, it doesn't appear that brain injured and our court system mix well. I'd love to get an advisory board started to review current practices, treatments of our brain injured within the court system to include family court and sentencing into our prison system. I know your presentations are geared to help ignite prospective future advisory board participation. How would you recommend beginning a board that serves the governor in how disabled are treated in court? Where issues have arisen, what systems should we institute to level the playing field for our disabled in court? So I will let that be an open question for anyone who is working in that field who might be better able to answer that question. Now we are going to turn things over to the remainder of our session. And the focus of this next piece here is on board readiness. So board readiness for everyone, but in particular for people with brain injuries. So first we're going to hear from two members of our TAL group, our TBI Advocacy and Leadership Group, which you've heard a little bit about both at this session and at previous sessions. We've had a number of representatives from that TAL group who inform our work, speaking on these sessions. We're going to hear first from Kelly Lang and Carol Starr, and they're going to talk about both some emotional and practical preparations for being on boards. After that, we'll hear from Teresa Moore from Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered, SAVE, and she is the lead for our Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center, which is also a program run out of ACL. And she will talk a little bit about some certain resources for continuing leadership paths. And then we'll go into Q&A for all three of those folks, and they'll also be joined by another member of our TAL group, Martin Kerrigan, who also serves and leads his advisory board in Maryland, and is another member of our TAL group. So I will go ahead and turn things on over to Kelly and Carol. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.
So we have a poll of our own to get us started, because we also wanted to find out a little bit about who's here for this section of it. So Connor is our poll master.
So if everyone can just vote for indicating your affiliation, and you can choose all that apply as a professional, person with brain injury, or a caregiver, family member, or friend. Wow. Just what we thought.
All right, so we have 92% professionals, 10% people with brain injuries, and 23% caregivers.
Okay.
So thank you very much. It's helpful to know as we talk about our subject here.
I'll start off by introducing myself. I'm Kelly Lang, and I live in Northern Virginia. And I am both a TBI survivor and a caregiver to a daughter who was, we both received our injuries during the same car accident in 2001. She was 3 at the time. She's now 22. So I come at it from a very different perspective. I think from both perspectives, it's the caregiver and the survivor meeting. And Carol and I have known each other for a number of years now, and we tag team each other all the time. It seems like through all our different affiliations, and we can get more into that. But and I have served on the Brain Injury Association of Virginia for 6 years, and I've also member of the Brain Injury Association of America's Advisory Council, and I've done public speaking on brain injury with different organizations through the years.
And I'm Carol Starr. I am a middle-aged woman with blondish brown hair. I'm wearing a pink sweater. And I am coming to you from Maine. And I have been a brain injury survivor since 1999. And like a lot of us, it changed my life forever. I was not able to go back to my former life as a teacher and a musician, and had to reinvent myself. And early on in my journey, I kept saying, I want to make something out of this. I want to do something with it. I've been through this life-changing experience. What am I'm supposed to do something with it. And little did I know that it was going to become my life's work to make a difference in the brain injury community. I'm doing that now as a speaker, as an author, and also as a member of numerous boards. That, as Kelly mentioned, some of the boards that she's on, and we are on a lot of the same ones. And the points that we're going to talk about for being on a board come from all of the experiences that we've had on various boards through the years. I have been on boards that are all survivors. I've been on boards where it's professionals and me as the lone brain injury survivor, which is my least favorite kind of board to be on. And I have been on boards where there have been numerous brain injury survivors and professionals. And each one comes with its own rewards and as well as challenges. Some of those boards and committees for me, I run a volunteer group here in Maine called Brain Injury Voices. This is at the survivor group. I am on with Kelly, the BIAA Brain Injury Advisory Council. I'm on the Maine BIA Advisory Board. I was on the Maine Conference Committee. I am part of the National Center on Advancing Person-Centered Practices and Systems. I'm a faculty member on that. And as Dana mentioned, I'm a member of the TAL group too. So we've had, between Kelly and I, we've had a lot of council and board experience. And there are a lot of rewards that have come from being as members of boards as a brain injury survivor. So Kelly, what have some of those been for you?
So I've been, like I mentioned, the Brain Injury Association of Virginia, BIAAs, working along with NCAPs, doing co-chairing the TAL group with you, being on their PALS group, which is for person-centered leadership and training. I have done, I've also been on other boards that weren't as, where there wasn't a brain injury focus, such as very special arts that two of my children were involved in. I went on their board. That was not a great experience. I don't think I was ready. I had to still build up my skills. Being on PTAs and such like that. I think the brain injury, though, is where my passion has come. Like Carol said, I wasn't able to go back to work. And I, was caregiving for a daughter, plus I had other children. But I wanted to do something fulfilling, something where I felt that I was making a difference. And that's where brain injury came in, because I really learned a lot through advocating for my daughter, because I actually advocated for her more than I did myself.
Yes, and I think being able to make a difference is such a big part as a survivor serving on a board. I mean, for me, I was 32 years old when I had a brain injury. I felt like my career ended before it really even began. So for me, feeling like I get to be part of something that makes a difference is a really big reward for being part of a board. I get to feel like I have colleagues again. There are others who care about this work, and I get to work together with people to do something that I couldn't do on my own. I get to feel like I'm a professional again, which is a nice feeling. You can't hold a job in the traditional sense anymore, but being on boards, it does give me that feeling of being a professional. And when it all works out well, it gives feelings of success, feelings of accomplishment, things that brain injury tends to take away from us. So being on a board it's so much more than just let's attend a meeting, every month, every 6 weeks, whatever it is. For survivors, it can be a really important part of our journey. So our goal for our piece of today is to talk about what brain injury survivors can do to be ready to serve on boards. These are tips that Kelly and I talked, these are drawn from our own experience, from our experiences on all these boards that we just shared, that we have been a part of. We talked about we were preparing this, what are some of the successes we've had, the challenges we've had, some of the surprises that we've had. Because I think for both of us, there wasn't a lot of preparation that happened. When we were asked to join these boards, it was like, well, just come to a meeting. And it was sort of like getting thrown into the deep end, actually a lot of the time. So we have divided our categories into two kind of broad categories of preparation for being on a board: emotional preparation and practical preparation. Connor, can the next slide? So we thought about that this emotional preparation was really important because there is a mindset to doing this. Because as a survivor, when we're dealing with limited cognitive energy, with skills that we don't have anymore, so often there's this feeling of we're less than. And it's a process to work through that. So the first one is just believing that we belong in that room, that we are equal, we are not less than. That when I first started serving on boards, like I would go in and I would feel like, who am I? Do I really belong here? But I do belong there. That the experience that I have, the perspective I bring is indeed important. And I think that's a mindset to bring.
Exactly. There's a reason that we're there, and there's a value to what we have experienced, and a certain skill set and knowledge set that we have that no one else can really understand, not even the medical professionals. They don't understand what it's like to be on the other side. So you're right, Carol, they do. And another thing we have to do is we have to know and acknowledge our injury. And for me personally, that was probably one of the hardest. Like I said before, I advocated a lot for my daughter, but I didn't talk about myself until for many years. And then all of a sudden I decided, you know what? I have to teach her there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's just a part of who I am now, and I need to embrace it and acknowledge it and move forward. And so that's huge, I feel, and that was really important for me. And I think I taught her a lesson in that also, and to know that it's okay. That doesn't mean just because you have this injury doesn't mean you're not a full person, doesn't mean you don't have something to bring to the outside world.
Absolutely, yes. And for me, it's knowing the challenges that I have and being okay with them. Like I get mentally tired during the first half of this whole webinar. There's a bed behind me. I watch from a reclining position because I know I cannot do anything for 3 hours. My brain doesn't let me. In order to have good energy for this, I needed to lie down. That's part of my brain injury. So knowing our injuries very well and what we need is part of serving on boards, I think. And then being prepared for what are we going to do. We said actually I think I would revise that to when brain injury grief surfaces, because I think of brain injury grief sort of like the grief after somebody we love dies. It gets better, but it never really goes away. There are always those little moments when things happen that remind us of who we used to be, remind us of what we used to be able to do. And just recently, we're in a group, and it was, well, okay, you're leading this group, you need to lead the group and take notes at the same time. And I had to say, I can't do that. And it was hard to say that. I was a teacher before. That's what I did for a living. And it brought up a little bit of that grief. And it's okay. But I think it's honoring that and knowing that that's probably going to happen, and be prepared for, well, what do you do about it? I think I talked to Kelly about it because it was one of the groups that we're in together. So having that plan for what do you do when you have those moments.
And you're right. And sometimes those moments come when you least expect them.
Yes.
And it can be just a simple remark. It could be anything really. I had to really, when I joined the board for BIAV, I had to really, it was a mindset because I had to drive 2.5 hours to get there. And, but I kind of put that on myself that I wanted to push myself a little bit. I was able to do it, but I had to be prepared. Another point that Carol and I have talked about many times is planning for your introduction and knowing what part of your story is most relevant. And this is really important because you cannot go on, a survivor can't go on for 20 minutes about their story. They've lost everyone in the room and no one's paying attention. No one's really understanding what the point is. You have to be concise. You have to be able to figure out what this group is meeting for and where your story fits into their space. Mm-hmm. And to keep it as brief, but also to give them content. And that's a hard balance sometimes. And it'll take practice to figure out exactly where that piece is. But you can get help from others, just play off of them and say, listen to my intro. What do you think? And it's just also a, live and learn. Each time you take a little piece of that and you move it into the next and it builds on itself.
Yes, I like that, practicing in front of others. I think that's a really good idea. I often think of like the elevator speech. All right, if you're in the elevator with somebody and you need to tell your story in 30 seconds, what would you say? What's the most relevant part? I'm Carol, I had a brain injury in a car accident. The details in most circumstances these days are irrelevant. If somebody wants more, I can give them more, but for most of the things I do at this point, it's not meaningful. It doesn't advance whatever I'm doing. They just need to know that I do have an injury, but all the details don't matter. The next one is about finding our niche, knowing our strengths. On a lot of the boards that I've been on, especially the ones that there are more professionals, they tend to move at a professional pace. They often will go at a pace that I, as a survivor, can't necessarily keep up with. So I've made the mistake more than once of trying to keep up with everything. That is just a recipe for brain overwhelm, for time on the couch, for feeling bad about myself, for that less than feeling. So it's really about knowing, well, all right, what is it that I bring? What are my strengths? For example, when I was on the conference committee, I said, well, you know what? I focus on the survivor track and the survivor keynote. The rest of it, I am ignoring. When they start talking about that, I let my brain take a little break because I can't focus on everything. I simply can't. And the more I try, the worse everything gets. So it's about maximizing the benefits that we can bring.
That's so true, because sometimes when you're new to a position or a board, you feel like you have to know everything. And you really don't have to know everything. You're not actually supposed to know everything, but that's hard for us to wrap our heads around. And, I learned very on in my injury recovery that I could no longer handle financials. I used to handle that, and I had to hand it over to my husband. And I also knew that anytime I was involved on a board or a committee, anytime they brought up, treasurer or anything, that was not for me. But that's okay. I'm not supposed to be good at everything. I'm not supposed to be, a jack of all trades. And it's okay to pass it off, but just to know that where your strengths are, because we all have them. Identifying a support system and who you can talk to is really important. If there's someone in the room, someone someone else you can reach out to when you're feeling that overwhelm, because it will happen, and it will happen often, especially in the beginning, or if you're just in brain overload and you need to walk out the door and you need to take a break, or you need to, you need a quiet space, or you need to just go for a walk around the block, whatever it might be, or you need materials to be written out in a different way, a bigger font, or, not double-sided, or have whatever it is, just to have someone else to talk to who's going to understand and who's going to help you to cope and to get through, because you will get through it.
Absolutely. Because I know when I get overwhelmed, like it's hard to think. And so if I've identified ahead of time, all right, who is my person? Who am I going to reach out to? Then my brain doesn't have to think. And it makes it easier, because Kelly and I are on a lot of the same boards. We're kind of each other's person for a lot of things. That we will text after meetings and talk about, all right, how did this go? How did you respond to this? All right, I had trouble with this. And it is so helpful to have another brain injury survivor to talk to run things by. And that kind of does relate to the last one on this slide, to know when, how, and who to ask for accommodations when symptoms arise. Like, who is the right person on this board? Is it the board chair? Is it another person? Because we do need accommodations, and it's hard to ask. But oftentimes that is indeed what we do need to do.
Connor, do you want to switch slides? Thank you. This next half is talking more about the practical prep, because it's not only just getting into that mindset of you're going on this board, but you also have to have practical steps to achieve your goals. And so Carol and I talked about all the little practical steps that we've utilized in our times. And one is to sit down with your calendar, whether it's a written calendar, or an electronic calendar, or both. I personally do both, but and to put all those meeting dates in your calendar. Usually a group, whether it's a committee, a board, will have their dates set at the beginning of the calendar year, and then to just have those all there, so then you know when they are. Nothing else, obviously conflicts still might happen depending, but you've got them all there, so you don't all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, I have a meeting. So that's the number one organizational type tool I would suggest.
Absolutely, yes, definitely. That these practical tips are like, when I first started joining boards, it was sort of like, it felt like it was like drinking from a fire hose, because all this information was coming at me, and these are the tips that helped to guess make the fire hose maybe a little less of a fire hose. The next one is to copy the contact information for all of the board members, to put it into your phone, into your computer, so that when you get emails from these people, like, who are they? That I put a line in my contact, like, BIA main board, conference committee, tall group, so that I know who these people are, because I don't necessarily remember from meeting to meeting, especially when meetings are spread out over time. Then I remember who they are. And if I've had a conversation with them, I might put that in my phone too, just things so that I can remember who people are.
Yes, that's great. That's really important to put in that contact info. You never know when you're going to have to reach out, or if they may reach out to you. And of course, now that we all have our cell phones, and if it's a number doesn't have a name, I know that I will just ignore it, because I don't want a telemarketer calling me. So that's really important to have. And the next one is was huge for me to figure out and to learn, was to make a group, so that if there's, whether it be smaller committees, the whole board, make all these different types of groups in your emails, because it'll be so much easier when you go to write. Because my gosh, to think, okay, who else was on? There's 5 people. Who else is on there? You spend so much mental energy trying to come up with that information. To have it all there for you in one place, easily accessed, that therefore you can spend more time on actually doing the other type of work that's actually more important than finding all the names.
Yep, I use an app on my phone for that. That I have multiple groups. I mean, there are some people who are in multiple groups, but it does make it so much easier to just do the one-click emailing. The next one is one that I use regularly. Is whenever I send out any email, I blind CC myself so that I get a copy of it. That way, if I've sent somebody I'm asking them a question, then I get a copy so that it's for me, it's my reminder to follow up, that it's in my email, that I can look and say, oh, have I received a response from that person? It jogs my memory of, oh, there's information out there that I need. There's something to do. Then once that conversation is closed, then I delete all of it. That's my way of keeping track of things.
And actually, Carol taught me that trick because I didn't do that before, and now I do it. And it is a good way to reference yourself and to say, oh yeah, they never got back to me. Creating the folders, both on your computer and then also, in your work area was essential for me. I had to, I've always used paper folders my entire life, and I still do. And it's just to have all that stuff right there. I can, especially now working, everything's virtual. I can just grab the folder and I have everything right there that I need, that I hopefully will need, and I'm ready to go. And same with my computer. I've read a bunch of organizing tips, and some people will say, don't use folders, they don't, but I find it's so much easier for me to go look at my folders, as long as I label them correctly. And I find all the stuff right there, and I try to, cross-reference it as as much as I can, because I think it's, again, that information overload, and then you're kind of like in this whirlwind because you can't find the right thing. It just makes everything so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I was really good at doing the ones on the computer. I was less good at the ones on the desk, and I'm really working on that now, because I would write like a note on my desk, but then I wouldn't put like a date on it. I wouldn't put any information about what it's for. So it would be like, call so-and-so, but I'm like, I don't know why or what this is in reference to. So now I have a little accordion file with different pockets for all the major projects that I have. So as I write things, they go in those files so that I don't have things, random notes that I don't know what the meaning is, kind of all over my desk. And that's working now better for me. And the last tip, practical tip, is about getting the agendas and the handouts ahead of time, because as survivors, it's really hard for us to do anything last minute. Last minute does not work for us. We tend to get overwhelmed. So when we can read the information ahead of time, it's good to feel prepared. That I know when I don't feel prepared, I get a little anxious. I start to feel overwhelmed. That's going to bring out more brain injury symptoms. And being prepared, it means that I can give better information during a meeting, because I don't necessarily always think quickly. But if I've had time to kind of process, then it gives me a better chance of making a better impact during a meeting.
That's so true, Carol, because yes, for a lot of brain injured people, the whole processing is such a huge component, and to be able to read it on your own as you at your own pace, and then to kind of think about it is really helpful. It's not even only for brain injury. I think it's for most people. If they have a little bit more time to think about it, and kind of, rather than, things happening all at once, and then we go into this, what we call like the brain fog or the brain tornado, or Carol refers to as her brain Hilda. So that is huge, and it's a little bit more work on the other end, but I think for everyone, it helps tremendously to know what's coming down the pike.
So those are our tips to help brain injury survivors be ready to serve on boards. So I think we are now going to turn it over to Teresa, and we're going to have the questions for both our part as well as Teresa's part after hers. So Kelly and I are going to sign off, and we'll see you for questions in a little bit.
Thank you, Carol and Kelly. Yes, you can put questions for Carol and Kelly in the chat at any time, and we'll come back to those after Teresa's presentation. And I will go ahead and turn things over to her now.
Hello, everyone. I just wanted to tell you I am Teresa Moore. I am with Self-Advocacy Becoming Empowered. I am a middle-aged person who is blonde and Caucasian, and I am wearing a red shirt, and that has significance because it says on it, I shape history every time I vote. And it's because I'm part of a project called the Go Voter Project with SAVE, but I also thought it was appropriate for today's topic because so many times when we're on boards and committees, when we're first starting out, we listen a lot and we are not sure how to vote. So we'll watch other people vote, then kind of sneak our vote in or not vote at all, and they will think that that's a form of agreement. So be very careful with your vote. They're extremely important because they could shape the history of the organization. You could be voting for something that you will not like, or voting for something that is an extreme amount of work that is not correct for your group's mission. So that it just made me think of when I first started out on boards, how afraid I was to vote because I wasn't sure I was ready. So the getting ready and getting on the board, I'm going to share some resources that I thought would help you on your leadership path, because every board and committee that you will serve on will give you some piece of the leadership journey that you are, I believe that it's something you're supposed to take, even if it is only for a short while, or it doesn't go well as you would like it to go, or if it goes fabulously and you're on there for years. But everything that we do involved with organizations teaches us something about ourselves and something about how to work with other people. So I think it's really helpful to keep that in mind, is that, you know, even if things did not go the way you thought they would, what did it teach you about yourself is something I try to ask myself now when I go through things. Next slide, please. So this is the organization that I'm part of, and this is our websites. The main organization is SAVE, Self-Advocacy Becoming Empowered, saveusa.org. And our big project where we collect resources is the SARTAC project. And that's the Self-Advocacy Resource and Technical Assistance Center. And it's under selfadvocacyinfo.org. Because if you type in SARTAC without a little one under it, you'll get something that's not very nice. And so we had to sneak that little one in there because it was a surprise. So don't do that. So next slide, please. And our slogan is self-advocacy and beyond. And when we were talking about building this website, we wanted to make sure that it included as much information that we thought self-advocates would run into. And so here I have for you, it's a checklist for your organization to go through to see if you're culturally competent. And it was made by Georgetown University in their cultural competency inclusion. And when you read their article, it's very complex, but we really wanted their information. So we worked really hard with them in partnership to develop a version that is easy read, fun to do with your group, and helps you make sure that your organization is diverse and answers cultural competency questions. Next slide, please. And I always like to put in videos and different kinds of information for people. If you like to watch videos, in our SARTAC website, we have under selfadvocacyinfo.org resources about leadership. And we have interviews with leaders from the self-advocacy movement of all different ages. And it's really interesting to watch their journey. They teach us by just telling us their story, the value of self-advocacy, the importance of all of our experiences laid out in video in such a friendly way. It helps my mind relax and I can take it in. Whereas sometimes when I'm trying to read, it's harder for me. So I like to see things or hear things, and that really helps. The other one is the importance of plain language that I have on here. And we work in partnership with many different groups. This one was done with ASAN, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and our partners at Green Mountain Self-Advocates work together to develop a plain language webinar that you can listen to. And it also gives you some checklists that you can go through when you're creating documents or other tools in plain language. And plain language is just thinking about what you want to say and trying to make it as friendly as possible so as many people can understand it as possible. So we write it, we read it, we take it all in, and then we also test everything that goes up on our website, with a tool to give it a grade level. And we try to make everything between the 6th and 8th grade reading level, because the average American is at the 5th grade reading level, which was something I didn't know before I started working in plain language, which was really surprising to me. That's what grade level newspapers try to write in most of the time. So that's just something that I learned. Next slide, please. And then this is a leadership manual that was put out by the Illinois Self-Advocacy Alliance. And I just thought it had a lot of really nice board information, general information about leadership roles, and it has some nice tips about Robert's Rules of Order in there. And I just liked the way it was put together, and it was put together with our friends supporting from the Human Services Research Institute. So they have been working with self-advocates for such a long time. They're a natural fit for support and helping self-advocates get down on paper what it is that they want people to have to support their self-advocacy groups. Next slide, please. So here is, I also like TED Talks. I don't know how many people have ever tried out the TED Talks, but they are very interesting. You can get information from all kinds of different people from all over the world that come in and talk about certain subjects. These are some folks that I really liked because they told their story and they told what their experiences were like as individuals with disability. And I thought that they were real helpful because ADHD has some similarities to what it's like to have a brain injury, and that kind of confusion sometimes that comes into play it just really, I related to her story very well, and I thought you guys might enjoy it. And so I just wanted to share these with you. Next slide, please. So that is my tools that I wanted to share with you, and I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time for questions.
Thank you so much, Teresa. That's a huge wealth of resources that you've shared with us. And Terry has put the individual links to those in the chat. So if you're interested in one particular resource or another, I really encourage folks to just check out the StarTAC website. There's so much content there. I'm going to invite Carol and Kelly and Martin to come back on screen and come unmute themselves for any Q&A here. We don't have any questions that have come in yet, just a lot of thank yous and a lot of folks thanking you for the information and for sharing your experiences. I'll kick us off, I guess, with a question while we wait for other folks to come on in. What, in your opinion, is one of the big mistakes that those of us without brain injuries might make in trying to accommodate people with brain injuries in our boards, commissions, and other environments?
I think one thing that comes to mind for me is inundating us with information.
Guilty.
Giving us like everything, and then it becomes overwhelming. That for me, it's worked better when I can get the information I need as I need it.
I'll just add on to what Carol said. I also think it's really useful if that information is delivered on a consistent basis so you know what to expect. So maybe, the agenda goes out a month and then a week before every advisory board meeting. And then maybe it's consistent where the notes come out, a week after, and then again, depending on how often your advisory board meets, the week before your next scheduled meeting, because it's just nice to know that it's there on a consistent basis. So I know if I got to look back through my email, I got to say, all right, well, I know to go look at the date because I know where the dates were, right? Like I wrote those down, or I can look into my Outlook calendar to just know that every time there's going to be those things at that same consistent interval.
Martin, and I know, does someone want to add?
Another thing that comes to mind.
Go ahead. Okay, I was going to say to make sure that everyone has something that they are doing to contribute, because if I haven't volunteered, I may be afraid that you don't think I have something to offer, and I'm not sure what I should, contribute. And maybe you've seen something that I'm good at that I don't even know I'm aware, I'm not aware of it yet. Especially if I'm a new leader and just joining and getting started, I may not know what I'm good at yet.
So I would very much agree with Teresa on that. Sometimes we don't know because it's hard to evaluate yourself, especially after, I would say even after an injury, especially because you don't know what skills you have lost until you start testing the waters again. So I think that's a key point.
Yes, I didn't know that I couldn't take notes until for my condo board. I tried to take the minutes, the entire meeting. I spent, should I write that down? Is that important? They never asked me to do that again.
And I'm just going to add on, and again, Carol and Kelly will tell you, sometimes I get a little too eager with some of my thoughts, especially around this topic. But as Carol and Kelly were sharing, I was looking at the difference between emotional and that practical prep, right? And this kind of goes along with that questioning too. And what I got was from the emotional prep is kind of, that's what we own, right? Like as survivors, that's kind of like almost what we have influence over, right? And I think a lot of times as survivors, we're overly self-conscious about our abilities or our deficits. And it's probably more our deficits than it is our abilities. And I think the reality is, for a lot of times, a lot of other people have the same issues. They just they're not as sensitive to it as we are, or they might not be as aware of it as we are. And I think that's the problem. And there are different things that you can put in place. Like, I know we've all talked about it before when we've met, is an acronym-free zone. And if somebody uses an acronym, it's like a race to see who can, yell at them first, say acronym-free zone, acronym-free zone. So it's just things like that we try to realize that, like was said earlier, we do have value. Not only do we have value, like we have the most value because it's about us, right? Like these things, especially these advisory boards, they're meant to better the lives of individuals with brain injuries. Who's better an expert than people who are living with brain injuries?
Yeah, absolutely.
One more thing that and I struggle with this because I want to be understanding, but yet it impacts me greatly as a brain injury survivor, is the sorry for the last minute notice. Getting things, I just got something, this is unrelated to any boards that I'm on, but just somebody wanting my input. Like, actually they wanted it today. I got it yesterday. I'm like,
nope.
If you really wanted my input, if you really cared about my input as a brain injury survivor, you wouldn't be asking me with like 1 day's notice. And but yet I recognize that things happen that are out of people's control, and I want to be sensitive to that too. And so I struggle with that, in all honesty, because it does impact me as a survivor, because I feel like I can't participate fully when stuff comes last minute. But I also understand the way the world of work, the way things work sometimes. So it's like I go back and forth on that.
Yeah, you talk a little bit about that and the pace of everything. And I think that's one of our hopes in, trying to build this critical mass of brain injury survivors on advisory boards, is not just obviously, because your experience is so valuable, but also we hope that with the more people with accommodation needs who are on those boards, the more those accommodations will actually come into play, because there is that critical mass there. So that's kind of one of our little sneaky goals that we've been trying to pull together there. Few questions coming into the chat here. One question is, what are your specific personal goals for participating on an advisory board, and what systematic steps do you take to ensure you are progressing towards those goals? So your goals and what steps you take to work towards those.
Well, for me, if I can go, for me, one of my goals is just to talk as a brain injury survivor and caregiver, because I bring like both of those in with me, and is just to try and teach people what it's like and what we need, what the survivors, caregivers need in order to be successful. And also and I guess I look at my goals and I see that if I'm progressing in my skills or progressing in my advocacy work, because I pretty much call it advocacy work, in getting others to understand where we're coming from. It doesn't necessarily mean a law is going to get passed or any great thing like that, but just to get other people involved in brain injury to understand where the families are coming from.
And I think some of my role is what Kelly said, but also to be vulnerable, to admit when I'm having challenges, as hard as it can be to say, I'm having a brain injury moment, I am lost, I am confused, I am melting down here. To be honest, to say when those things are happening, because it does change things, especially when this is the point. That sometimes when I do that, it's hard at first, but it changes the direction of things. Both for me as well as for a group, because sometimes a group can be going off full steam. It's like, wait a minute, you are losing the survivors here. And so I think a part of my role is to do that, to be open about the challenges. And I also want to to learn new skills, to be a better advocate, to be a better speaker, to make more contributions, and to continue to learn about my own injury, to push my own boundaries, to say, okay, that might have been a little too much, and to find where those lines are.
And there's kind of a connected
Many
question.
times,
Oh, go ahead, Teresa. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, typically I'm brought into a group as a mentor or something like that to play a role to help some of the self-advocates who are struggling to participate. The membership is not quite sure how to support them. And I'm there to help figure out what the issues are and help model how to support that person, how to pause that meeting, how to take, how that person has the power to say, wait a minute, I don't understand what you're talking about. You're going too fast, like they're talking about. And that person being able to say, now I get it. I'm ready to vote now. And getting them to that point where they are, in full power of their vote and ready to make that decision. Because what I don't like to see, and I will purposely stop a meeting and say, pause just a second. We're, like you said, we're losing all the self-advocates or the survivors because, it's going too fast. If you look, and the people who are voting, there's only 3 people who are actually raising their hand out of 10. What's going on is because it's going too fast, and we need to ask some questions here. And that is called call for discussion. And I'll teach the moment and, use the Robert's Rules of Order or whatever that board uses and say, now, what would you do knowing that this person needs some information? And then have them break it down and take their time to learn the process. Once the people do it a few times, what really happens is it actually gets faster, because then you have their full participation and they actually start picking up speed because they actually start understanding how the group works, how decisions get made, and how to vote. And we find that once we model it several times through a few meetings, as long as there's no long breaks in between those monthly meetings, if it goes 6 months, we might have to do a refresher, but if it's every month, they pick that up and they just run with it. And it's like a locomotive then. You can't stop the decision-making process. And I just like modeling that for them. And then I'm done. I'm out.
One of the things that we've done in Maryland that we have found to be very successful, we have a standing subcommittee that meets prior to every advisory board meeting, and we use the acronym of SAFE for Survivor and Family Empowerment. And this was before Survivor became a taboo word for some people, by the way. And what we do is that it allows an opportunity for any survivor and family member to meet prior to the meeting and kind of discuss where we're at, kind of see if we have a uniform voice around any agenda items, to kind of ask questions of one another about what's going on, what we're doing, and to go from there. The one thing though, as I was listening to Carol and Kelly speak earlier, and I was thinking this is, and I talk about SAFE quite frequently. I mean, I'm looking at some of the people on this call nodding their heads because they've probably heard me talk about SAFE, the 20th time. It's not necessary though. I think all too often we get lumped into this one category where, well, all the survivors should be thinking the same thing or feeling the same way. And that's not right. They're like everybody else on the board has their own opinions. We can have opinions. So, and I like the fact that there have been some times some of our SAFE subcommittees have ended without a resolution in regards to where we stand, because it's okay to take different stances. People come from things from different perspectives, and to diminish that or to expect somebody to change that is not right. And I think the more important thing is allowing everybody to have their own voice as opposed to everybody having the same voice when it comes to the survivors and family members.
It's a really good point.
It's a great point.
Another question that's come in, do you all have, or is there a special one-pager or guide to help survivors express their stories in a format or timely manner that is more effective for all partners at the table? We want to make sure there is enough time for survivors to feel heard and advisory board members to understand.
So what we do, Marilyn, we do at the start of every meeting, we have the introduction where you just go around and you say your name, who you're representing. But then we also allow at every meeting for usually about 2 people to do partner sharing. And there's a set of 4 or 5 questions that the person can answer in a partner share. And the expectation, it takes no longer than 5 minutes. So it's who you are, how do you relate back to, how does that relate back to brain injury? Any initiatives that you are working on or that your organization or whoever you represent is working on, and anything else pertinent back to the world of brain injury. And that's how we kind of, we found that was really beneficial because A, it helps keep people in a, without going overboard with the timing. But also B, it allows us the opportunity to realize, oh my gosh, so-and-so at this other agency that I have no knowledge of is working on something very similar to what I am. Maybe we can share resources. Maybe we can work with each other. So we have found that's been pretty beneficial for us.
Great. We'll go to one last question and then we'll go in, and then we're kind of running out of time here. So, and then I'll bring Tom back on to wrap up. As survivors of brain injury, what would be your hopeful outcomes of the advisory board you were a part of? So I guess you guys kind of talked already about what your goals are, but what would be the goals for what you would want to see from the advisory board?
Overall, to make life better for other brain injury survivors.
And, obviously the same goal that that ACL has is that you're going to have enough of, representation from the community itself of the survivor, family members, those that are there for them, rather than just having, bureaucrats and, medical doctors and representatives and such, and just to make sure that enough people are represented, because, we all come at it from a very different angle. All our experiences are very unique, and you need that. You need to have those different perspectives to understand it, to move forward.
I'll actually use the language from our advisory board report, or I know we've used it many times, is to improve the lives of all Marylanders who are affected by brain injury. That's the overall. I mean, we have legislative things that we work on at times. We've had one that I've been trying to spearhead for several years now, and it just keeps hitting a dead end. But overall, that is our overarching goal, is to improve the lives of Marylanders impacted by brain injury.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Really appreciate your time. I'm sorry we didn't get to every single question that's in the chat here. I think we could do 3 hours just on this conversation here, and we would all really enjoy it. Thanks, everyone. If Tom is back on, I'll turn things over to him to close us out. Thank you.
My goodness. Wow. Again, I am every week I say this, and every week it's truer than the week before. I'm blown away by the amount of care and compassion and intelligence that all of you bring to this topic. And thank you very much for all of that. I do want to say we have a few real-time evaluation questions. Do not leave yet. We want to make sure that we can deliver future high-quality webinars around TBI issues. So I believe there it is. The evaluation has been posted by Connor up on the screen. Please take a few minutes while I am wrapping things up to fill that out. I want to first thank our federal partners, Sean Barrett from the Independent Living Office at the Administration for Community Living. Thank you, Sean, for your participation today. Teresa Moore with SABE, the Self-Advocates Becoming Empowered. Really, really valuable stuff. Thank you so much. I want to thank our grantee presenters, grantees from Tennessee, Ashley Bridgman and Paula Denslow, from West Virginia, Amanda Accord-Vera, and from Alaska, all the way from Alaska, Lucy Cordwell. Thank you all, because I know that you all were more than just presenters, but you were folks who put this all together, and thank you so much for that. There's a lot of good information out in the world that wasn't there a few hours ago, so thank you very much. Pam Bryan, Rodney Smith, Kelly Lang, Carol Starr, Martin Kerrigan, thank you so much for sharing your experiences of being part of advisory boards and councils and representing yourselves and representing people with TBI. Very, very valuable, and I can't say enough about that. Thank you for that. ACL staff, of course, Dana Fink, thank you for your participation. Rebecca Ellison, Wilma Roberts, support for the program. The TBI TARC staff, the Technical Assistance and Resource Center staff, Judy Detmer and Maria Crowley and Terry Gamacho Gonzalez. Again, none of this would be possible without all of you, and certainly our superhero in residence, Connor Bailey, for the amazing logistics today, seamless information sharing with the PowerPoints and all of the tricky Zoom things that can be so, can trip you up. Thank you all very much. Please continue to fill out the evaluation if you're not finished. And I just want to say again, thank you for a great day, for a great month of TBI Tuesdays. And we hope to see you all very, very soon. You will get an email in your watch for an email about the recordings of these webinars, as well as the PowerPoint of the PDF of the PowerPoint. So thank you so much, and have a great rest of the month and a good spring, and we'll see you all soon.